Hello everyone, I'm Professor Geek. Welcome back to my channel. And I wanted to make a video addressing this, of all things, this article from the ridiculous and unworthy of even showing on screen bleeding cool article about how DC Comics is selling half as many titles now as they used to. And I'm not going to show the article or go through the article bit by bit. Ethan Van Sciver did a great job of that on one of his recent videos. You can go there, and I would recommend, if you're interested in the article, go look at Ethan's coverage of it. Don't give Bleeding Cool the click. Anyway, the article points out the fact that DC is selling fewer titles, and Ethan Van Sciver pointed out that it's probably the proper response to the current comic market. The comic market is not doing well at all. And he did a great job of talking about the different approaches, how Marvel is going all out with more titles and more variants and more number ones and whatnot, and that in this current market, probably selling fewer titles is the better way to go. Of course, Marvel is far more overrun with the SJW propaganda and those creators just going completely off the deep end with that nonsense. And it's coming into DC as well, but it's not quite as prevalent. And he gave some great insights into the Hanna-Barbera line, which is apparently now canceled. I guess that's gone now for good. And I'm glad to see it go, except for Future Quest. Future Quest was just an epic, amazing title. And Future Quest Presents, as it rolled over into, that's truly sad. That was a real win. That was really DC Comics finally doing something right. And Ethan even talked about how their whole take on Hanna-Barbera was just silly, trying to do these adult, edgy, edgelord kind of takes on these classic cartoon characters. Future Quest was the only title that did not go that route. It remained true to the classic adventure, fun, iconic heroes of the Johnny Quest, of the Space Ghost, and all of those franchises that were rolled up into that title. So that's a sad thing to see that one title go, but I'm happy to see Scooby Apocalypse and Snagglepuss and all of that awful garbage just out of there. But there's one element from this conversation that I haven't heard anybody add to it, at least in terms of the big YouTube names, and that is what I'm here for. You know, if there's a chance to point out Dan Didio's idiocy, it's going to be from me. And yeah, it's true that Marvel is far more overrun with the SJW nonsense. DC's getting there. DC's definitely getting there. But DC has another problem wholly its own, and that is the fact that Dan Didio, from Dan Didio down to his writers such as Tom King and Bendis, they are hell-bent on deconstructing and remaking the DC universe into something completely different than it was ever meant to be or that has ever been loved for in its iconic nature. I've talked about this in multiple videos, but it's time to bring it up again when this is affecting their titles. People are not buying your works anymore. It's garbage. Teen Titans was canceled. Well, duh. Teen Titans became a crap book. You turned Damian, who was finally becoming a likable character with Super Sons. You had to break that up because Bendis. You had to break that up and then turn Damian into this little, basically evil little villain. I mean, how can this character ever be redeemed? That was what people who did like him liked him for, was that he was fighting away from his past of being, the murderer, the assassin and whatnot, and he was trying to be better. Well, you just crapped all over that. Now he's just a little torturer. Judge and jury. I mean, that whole run was ridiculous. Of course, all the boneheaded moves I've talked about before, how Dan Didio's little agenda has been ticked off point by point. I'll place a link to the video that I talked about in there. He didn't want Nightwing around, so he got rid of Nightwing. Now he's Rick Grayson instead of Dick Grayson, so nobody can make any more penis jokes. I mean, come on, Dan Didio, grow up. He is ruined the Superman-Lois Lane marriage, but it's not ruined. They're still married, guys. They're just not really married. John Kent is no longer some lovable, joyful boy. Now he's been aged up and he's going to be darker and broodier and whatever. This is garbage. Dan Didio is methodically steering the DC universe back to the New 52. In fact, it's practically there. I mean, Rebirth is gone. There's not even a shred that remains of Rebirth and all of the fun and all of the joy that Rebirth necessarily had to bring back to the DC universe for the sales. And Dan Didio had his way. He's turned the universe back to what he wanted it to be. And guess what? The sales are plummeting again. How is nobody in the higher-ups seeing this? What kind of spin does Dan Didio place on this to his bosses? Or do his bosses even care? Does Warner Brothers even monitor this crap at all? Is anybody paying attention? I mean, it's as blatant as the nose on your face. This is a pattern. It's very clear what Dan Didio hates about the DC universe and what he is determined at every turn when he's given the choice and the power to recreate it as. And every time he recreates it as this thing the sales go down. People say no. You get those spectacle sales now and then. New 52, of course, had the little boost, but that was all spectacle. That was all spectacle. And before anybody comes up and says, well, I liked it, yeah, it brought in some new fans, but those new fans were not enough to sustain it. That's a fact. That's sales. Facts don't lie. They don't care about your feelings or what you liked about the run. And it's not to say, of course, that some cool ideas didn't come up or some cool stories or whatever didn't crop up in the New 52. I mean, you're going to have good writers and good artists who are going to prevail regardless of horrible editorial decisions, but the universe overall was simply not worth spending any time in. That's what it has become again. You might be able to point to this one title or this, that, and Tomasi on Detective Comics or Brian Edward Hill on Batman and the Outsiders or something like that, sure. But when you're down to talking about just this one comic title that's decent and the universe isn't even worth defending anymore, that's sad. That's incredibly sad for DC above all. DC is the cornerstone of the comic book universe. DC was the first with Superman, and they should proudly embrace that iconic cornerstone status that they have. But no, that's not as cool and edgy as what they want to be, is what they want to turn DC into. They want to make it into some sort of weird reflection of Marvel in the 70s and 80s. They want to turn it into what the Elseworld titles were stretching out into in the 80s with The Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen and all of that nonsense. I've gone into detail at length about this in different videos, so I won't rehash it all, but I will link to those in the top right-hand corner. But it deserves to be said again with this new information that they are reducing their titles. It might be the smart move in the wake of a failing market, but you have to ask the question, why is the market failing? And there are a bunch of reasons for that. Of course, Marvel has its share of blame as well as the SJW stuff and all of that. But DC has its own unique share of that blame, and that is the fact that they are completely decimating everything that was good and loved about their universe, everything that brought readers back in waves. I've talked to my comic book shop, I've talked to other comic book shops I go to, and they all attest to the fact that there is they've described it as an exodus. They said there is a mass exodus in their subs away from DC. Some people are going to Marvel, people are going to indie comics. I'm certainly going to Dynamite Comics and indie publishers and places like that. That's where I'm getting my comic fix these days, certainly with the Comicsgate community and all of these indie publishers popping up on crowdfunded campaigns. That's amazing, and that's finally really getting some momentum to the point where I think it's really taking a chunk out of the comic book market, where DC and Marvel are starting to feel that. You don't have to go to them. They are not your sole sources for good, iconic comic book stories anymore. And it's their fault. They dropped the ball. They ceased to be that on their own. So, of course, people are going to fill in the gap. That's how mythology works. That's how society follows its mythology. So what can we do about it? What can we do, us fans who love dearly the DC characters as they are supposed to be portrayed, as they truly are, as they've been consistently portrayed for decades upon decades. Yes, they go through changes. Yes, story arcs develop. Yes, different titles and whatnot and runs, they get fresh starts and reboots and everything. But even with the Marv Wolfman and Crisis and everything, these characters have consistently remained who they are at their core for decades upon decades up until 2011, when Dan Didio had the power to break that down and begin poisoning their core, completely remaking them into what he wanted them to be. So what do we do about that? What do we do about that as fans now? Well, just as always, you vote with your wallet, and people have been doing that. Apparently, people have been doing that because that is what is showing in the market now. DC is having to publish fewer titles now because people simply aren't buying their garbage. The Bleeding Fool article talks about, well, there's hope, because there's the Walmart market, they're extending out. The Walmart market is a joke. I don't know why people are starting to talk about that as though that's some new great idea and that's the future. They don't do it right. The concept is a good one, sure, extending out into different markets, trying to reach different readers, but they haven't changed anything about their MO here. The comic titles in Walmart are hard as hell to find. No one can find them. If you can find them, they're never stocked. They never come out on any consistent date. I have been to Walmarts all throughout my state. I've never seen any of them even remotely close to selling out. They're always behind in what titles they should be out and featuring for that month. Some of them have been good, but the ones that have been good are the ones that have collected enough of the great old stories to make them good. Occasionally, some of the new stories with some of the characters have been worthwhile. The recent Wonder Woman run has been quite good by Palmiotti and Amanda Conner, shockingly. Tom King is ruining Superman. His story there, he is just giving him all kinds of psychological trauma. Just that's Tom King's MO. Tom King, buddy, you got to get some help. You really do. And I don't mean that to be funny. I mean, this is a problem. This really is a problem. You can tell from writers and directors and whatever, you can tell what's going on in their minds when they consistently place certain themes over and over and over again in their work. And you have done the same exact thing to Vision, to Mr. Miracle, to Batman, to the entire DC universe now. Now you're zeroing in on Superman with these titles. You got to get help. You can't keep giving all of these characters your own issues. I mean, it's very, very clear to see for anybody that wants to take a look at it. You have to stop dragging our cultural folklore, our cultural mythology through your own issues. This is not acceptable in any way. Dan Didio loves it, of course. Oh, that's so great. It's dark and edgy, and Dan Didio needs to go. Fire Dan Didio. Hashtag fire Dan Didio forever. You should never touch comics again. So I'm probably going into a bit of a rant now. I could go at this for a long time, but I'll stop there. Haven't made one of these videos in a while, but nothing's changed. Still feel the same way, and DC Comics for me are not really worth reviewing anymore. There are this or that title that's good, but again, the universe overall hasn't earned those reviews, hasn't earned the attention. DC is irrelevant, and I made that video a while ago that DC was irrelevant. They're no longer worth reviews. They're dead, and a lot of people agreed with me. Of course, you know, you had your holdouts. Oh, you're blah, 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 blah. Well, you know what? Take a look at the sales. Take a look at the titles they're reducing to. I guess I was right. So that's all for now. Thanks for liking and subscribing. Please share the video around. And until next time, keep enjoying and digging deeper into the hero stories you love. Thanks for watching.